Hello and welcome to Sail Vermont's Seamanship Series. Today is volume number 1, episode number 1, and we will be talking about one of my all-time favorite topics, which is line handling. We're going to offer you some bullet point advice on the hows and the whys we do what we do, but more importantly, as we educate our team members at Sail Vermont who are all required to do the line handling the same way, hopefully you guys out there in YouTube land get some helpful hints that will help you in your boating experience. So without further ado, today's episode is all about how to coil and stow a line. I'd like to start off today's topic by offering you 3 bullet points. Bullet point number 1, everything that I do with this line when I'm coiling and stowing it should set me up for the next thing that I'm going to do with this line. And that holds true for almost any time you're touching a line or using it for any purpose. Anything that I do with this line should set me up for the next thing I'm going to do with it. Bullet point number 2. When I coil and stow a line, it should be easy to deploy. And what does that mean? Easy to deploy means I should be able to quickly and neatly take this from standby mode, which it's in hanging here, to working mode without the line fouling. So we coil and stow our lines so they can be quickly and neatly deployed and taken from a standby status to a working status without fouling. Which brings us to bullet point number 3. Simply, neatness counts. Coil length's the same, number of rings the same, our upper tying the same, neatness counts. All of our stowed lines should look the same. And the reason is, do you remember bullet point number 1? Bullet point number 1 says, everything I do with this line, including the neatness, should set me up for the next thing that I'm going to do with it, which, if you recall, was bullet point number 2. This line should be ready to rapidly and neatly deploy into a working mode without it fouling. Neatness counts. That's bullet point number 3. All right, so I've got my line here coiled and stowed and ready to go. I'm going to take this from standby mode to working mode. I'm going to show you the way I do it, then we will slow it down, break it down, and teach you how to do it. And there you have it. Break this down into the pieces. First off, let's talk about the length of the tail. This is what I call the tail. In general, 3 feet is the minimum that I like to have. In this case, I like to have my tail be about 1 full arm's width. Things I want to point out in this particular coil. My rule of thumb is always 3, 1, 2, 3 times around. If you end up with a tail that's a little bit too long, sometimes a 4th or even a 5th can work. The larger your line is, the more bindings you're going to want around it. Pro tip number 1, remember you want these 3 coils down far enough on the bundle that you can still work with this opening right here to pull your line through, and you'll see that in a minute. So let's start by undoing this line. One of the reasons I use this is it's very quick and easy to untie and get into deployment mode. So in this case, I have my tail, which I'm holding, and if I follow this down through the lock here, all I have to do is grab the tail below this loop, and I can pull it and the whole thing will come free. You see the coils are still on here, and here's why I wrap them from bottom to top, so that when I go to undo them, I am pulling them off of each other in the order that they want to come out. Pro tip number 2, once you get your line to this point, make note, where is your working end coming from the top or is it from the bottom? In this case, I want to throw this line on the deck so that it is already flaked. What does that mean? This line is effectively flaked as you hold it in your hand here. I'm taking a note. If you can see, the line that I'm about to use is coming from this side of the coil. So I want to throw it on the deck with this on top so that it's ready to go to work. So I'm actually going to throw it down like that. And let's pretend that it's flaked nice and neatly on deck, and we're getting ready to coil it and stow it. So here's the steps. Step 1, determine your loop length. Well, what does that mean? We're going to leave one piece of this line hanging straight down, and this is what's going to determine our loop length. How do I do it? I'll hold my arm at a 90-degree angle, and I leave the line about 6 inches off the ground. Now I'm just out of frame, but if I raise this up, you see the bottom of the line here. I'm going to lower that till my elbow is at 90 degrees, and it's about 6 inches off the ground. I've done this so many times that I know that that's basically where I want my loop length to land. But in this case, that's a good frame of reference for you. Anytime you have a heavy object to attach your line, for example, a halyard that has a buckle, you want to start with that down at the very end. So if you look at this coil, you can see the buckle right here. So this was the very first thing that I started with. This is what I used to determine my loop length. So I started with that down, and then I made my loops to match. Let's look at a second option for you to determine the correct loop length. Very, very easy way is do a full stretch of your arms all the way out. We call this the wingspan. Go to your wingspan, fold it in half, then give yourself that 6 inches again. Same thing. So I can do it with a 90-degree 6 inches, or I can do it with a full wingspan, bring it in half, and then I give it about, and you can see the bottom of the line, give it about another 6 inches, and your loop length is going to be correct. Now here's how we gather our loops in slow motion. So I go full length, and when I bring this together, I'm going to give this line the tiniest little twist as I lay it in my hand. Then I make my adjustment, and that's what it looks like. So now that my coils are done, how do I know how much to leave to get my loops around this correct? And here's what I tell people. When you get to this point, you should have the equivalent of, from this hand, should go down, then up to this hand, and then back down again at roughly the same length as your loops. So here's our loop length. So you notice that this line goes down, then comes back up to this hand, and then ends about the same loop length. So down, then up, then down. This will give you a perfect tail every time. All right, now it's time to add our loops around this bundle. Remember we talked about setting our loops in this plane with enough space to get our hand through here. For me, it's about 6 or 8 inches. Somewhere down here is where we will put our first one, and the next ones will stack on top. So I take my line like this. I'm going to take this from this hand and throw it across my front. I let it hit the deck, so I have my line here like this. I'm reaching this hand underneath to grab it. When I bring it around, this right here is where I set my height for these loops. So I'm going about 6 inches down right here. Now, I want to use my pinky to grab this. So I'm going to show you what that looks like up close. I'm bringing this line around and I'm handing it to my pinky. Notice right here that the line that I just brought around comes over the top of this loop. So I'm 6 inches down and it's now coming over the top. Now the second time around, again, throw that across. I'm reaching under to grab it. I'm making sure it lines up nice and neat and tidy right here. And again, giving it to my pinky. One more time across, reach under, set it on top, grab it with my pinky. So now I've effectively been around 3 times, and I'll show you what that looks like. I've got my 1, 2, 3, and it's still being held with my pinky right here. And here's where I talked about, we need to leave enough space in this opening to be able to reach our hand through. So now that I've reached this point, I can let the tail dangle, and I'm gonna reach between and take the line from my pinky. So it's on my pinky there, I'm gonna reach through and grab it. I'll do it this way, reach through and grab it. If I simply pull it through, I am left with these 2 pieces, a loop here and the tail here. Now I simply grab the tail and pull it through, and I have a nice, neatly coiled line ready to hang. Now that we have our line coiled and ready to stow, let's talk about 3 ways to fasten this to a stationary object. Temporary, semi-permanent, and permanent. All are based on the clove hitch knot, which we'll address in episode 2, but for now I wanted you to see it, a little sneak peek. Temporary is a clove hitch with a slip in it. So in this case, we tie our clove hitch, but instead of passing the end of the line up through, we're actually going to take a bite in the middle and leave it with a loop up top. I grab my hand here, give it a couple yanks, and that's temporarily secure and will stay for most applications. This is appropriate when you're about to use the line for something else, or maybe you need it 15 minutes from now, or you're just having a line on standby that you want to be able to grab and go very quickly. To make this semi-permanent, we're actually just going to pull the tail all the way through. So in this case, pull that up, and this just became semi-permanent. In other words, This can stay like this for the duration of a charter, for example, or while you're out sailing if you think you're going to need it in an hour or two. To make this truly permanent, we're actually going to put a lock around the standing end. So we have this standing end here, and I'm just going to throw a half hitch in right there. That move right there makes that permanent. That will not come out no matter how much it gets shaken or how much vibration is. If you're out on delivery or a long passage, you need a line to stay someplace and not move, that is the way to do it. But understand, this is also the slowest to undo. So if it's a line you think you might need, maybe choose one of the other fastening methods. So that's it for episode 1 of our volume number 1 line handling series. Volume 1 videos will all be about line handling and what we do here at Sail Vermont. Episode 1 in this case, how to coil and stow a line. We hope you got a lot out of this video, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks for watching.